talk about it in the remaining of this lecture. So there is also some calculation. So if you put both of consumer surplus and producer surplus together, so consumer surplus is the value to buyers minus the amount paid by buyers, and then producer surplus is amount received by seller minus the cost of seller. And these two terms basically cancel each other. So the amount paid by buyer is equal to the amount received by seller. And total surplus is basically the value to buyers minus the cost to sellers. So if you want to measure the total surplus, like how much a market of iPhone will increase the surplus of a society, so you subtract the cost of producing iPhone from the benefit that the iPhone will give to the buyers. So if the buyers receive more benefit from buying an iPhone and the cost is less, so there should be more production of iPhone. So why? Because the total surplus will increase, and that's good for the whole society. Okay, so that was the total surplus, is basically the surplus of producers and the surplus of consumer. And I will explain two terms as it's also defined in a book. So one is efficiency and another is equality. So efficiency is the property of a resource allocation of maximizing the total surplus received by all members of the society. So in any resource allocation, what I mean by resource allocation is, for example, if Apple should make a plant for producing iPhone, so they are putting resources into use. So that's the definition of resource allocation. Or for example, you are buying an iPhone, so you are paying 1,000 euros, so that's your resource, and you allocate it to iPhone. So and this resource allocation will be efficient if the total surplus which is received by buyers and sellers will be higher. So any purchase or any transaction which will increase the total surplus, that's basically an efficient a definition of efficiency, or you can call it an efficient market. So I will repeat myself. So what do we mean by efficiency? Efficiency is a system of allocation of resources in a way that the total surplus is maximum, or that all the members of the society receive maximum amount of surplus. So who are these members of the society? They are either the buyers of one product or the sellers of one product. So if you want to have an efficient system, what we do is, according to this principle, is that we focus on the consumer and producer surplus, and we want to make it as big as possible or as high as possible. So that's the definition of efficiency. Equality is the other way around. It's the property of distributing economic prosperity uniformly among the members of the society. So if we are considered about equality, we say like it doesn't matter who is rich or who is poor. We want like all people of the economy have equal benefits. For example, there is a good example of a pie distributing a cake or a pie. So if we are considering about the efficiency, we want this cake or this pie as big as possible, so the total surplus is increased. But if we are talking about equality, we are talking about how we will slice or cut this cake cake into pieces. So do you want that every people receive an equal amount of this pie, or do you want that some receive a high amount of it or others less of it? So that are the two directions that economists usually discuss. So some people they prefer efficiency, some people they prefer equality, and the more you have the efficiency, probably that will also affect your equality. So yeah, so there is a trade-off between choosing efficiency and equality. And this book, or the following part of this book, it's mostly we give preferences to efficiency because we focus more on maximizing the total surplus or the total economic welfare for both buyers and sellers. So unfortunately, we will not be talking much about equality, but that's also fine. So everyone has their own preferences, and yeah, as long as we understand both of them, that will be completely fine. Okay, moving to the next subtopic, it's about evaluating market equilibrium. Okay, so if you see figure 7, so basically when there is a market equilibrium, to put it in simple words, so there is a supply and demand, and then there is a market equilibrium at a given price. That market equilibrium basically maximizes the consumer surplus and producer surplus, and that's an efficient market. So any other distraction in this equilibrium will basically distort and will interfere in the market, and that will not be efficient. So that will not increase the efficiency of the market. I would recommend that you read this part, and in figure 8 you will see like if the amount of production was not according to the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, you will see like probably that would lead to higher costs for producers and less benefit for consumers, as in figure 8. For example, quantity 2 or Q2 is above the equilibrium quantity, and here in this red line you see that the cost to sellers is much more higher as compared to the value received by the buyers. So this Q2 is not an efficient way of producing iPhone, for example. Why? Because it costs a lot to the seller as compared to benefits that consumers or buyers will receive from that. These are the 3 principles which I will read 3 of them, and the main idea is the same. Whenever there is a market equilibrium, that is basically maximizes the total surplus of the market, and that's an efficient way of production. So these guiding principles are: number 1 is that free markets allocate the supply of goods to the buyers who value them most highly, as measured by their willingness to pay. So in a free market, the goods are supplied to those who value the product much more higher as compared to others. For example, if the iPhone is at 1,000 euros, only those who value it more, for example, only those who say, I will buy iPhone for 1,200, so only those people will buy it. But if someone values iPhone for 800, they will not buy it. So if there is a free market, the supply of good will be, or the iPhone will be sold only to those who value it more and not to those who value it less. And it's the same the case for the producers. So producers in a free market allocate the demand for goods to the sellers who can produce them at the lowest cost. So if there is a free market, only those will produce a product which has minimum costs. If the cost is high, so it's not good for the society because they are wasting resources, so they will not be producing. And only those who have minimum cost, they will be billing or they will be producing that product. And that again means like we are not wasting resources by producing an iPhone which costs a lot, but as nobody buys it or it's too expensive, and we will not waste resources on production of such iPhone. And the third principle is that free market produce the quantity of goods that maximizes the sum of consumer and producer surplus. So as I said, if there is a free market, and then that basically will allow for the production of the good, which will maximize the consumer as well as producer total surplus. Yeah, so that's the third outcome of the market equilibrium. Yeah, to just put it again in brief words, so whenever there is a market equilibrium, like there is a point where supply and demand curve intersects, that is basically, as you see it in figure 8, that is the maximum amount of consumer surplus and producer surplus that we could achieve. So any other allocation as shown in figure 8 will not be efficient, and it will not increase the total surplus for both producers and consumers. Okay, I have some concluding remarks. Okay, so this idea of market equilibrium is basically also the concept of free market. So in a free market, producer produces a product and then they set a price according to their own will, and consumers also buy it according to their own will, or when they want to buy an iPhone, they will buy it. So this system is basically maximizes the total welfare of the society. Why? As I said before, it maximizes the consumer surplus. It also maximizes the producer surplus. And that's an efficient way of production. So this whole concept is also used by using this laissez-faire term or free market, this French term, and that means like leave people to decide, or leave to do, or let people do as they will. So this concept says like let Apple produce iPhone, and then let them choose a price for their iPhone, and let the people also decide if they want to buy the iPhone at that given price. So if there is a free market and government does not say like you should sell the iPhone for this much price, that basically maximizes or thus increases, or it's a efficient system of the market economy. It maximizes the welfare of the consumer, it maximizes the welfare of the producer. And that's basically the definition of free market or the free market economy. Everyone is free to choose their price of product. Everyone is free to buy a product or don't buy a product. And that way, the total welfare will basically increase for the society. If you put it in another context, for example, if there is a country in which the price of iPhone is regulated, so in this country it says like, okay, the price of iPhone should not be more than 500, and then yeah, so what happens, for example, Apple will not sell iPhones there because 500 is much more lower than their cost. Their cost could be 800. So what happens is like Apple is not doing business, so it's not good for Apple. And also there are people in that country that they really want to buy iPhone, so they're ready to pay 1,000 200 for iPhone. But because the price is now regulated by government and Apple is not more selling iPhone anymore there, so they are not buying an iPhone, so they are not feeling good. So their well-being is lost. Why? Because this transaction has not taken place. They couldn't buy an iPhone, and Apple company, they cannot also sell their apples because government is putting a pressure on them not to increase the price above 400 or so. So that results in an inefficient market. So the market is not an efficient way. Why? Because producers are sad and then consumers of iPhone are also sad. So that was another extreme of uh, an inefficient market. So the example I have just given, it's the how it would look like if a market is not efficient. Okay, and then so how basically this free market works, how Apple decides the price of its iPhone and how consumers decide if they want to buy an iPhone or not. So all of them basically boils down to the concept developed by Adam Smith, and he says like the price is an invisible hand which informs both producers and consumers how much to produce and how much to buy products. So basically, the price gives a signal to the producers of iPhone, like how much people are willing to pay, and also it also informs the buyers, like how much value do they put on the iPhone. And with the help of this invisible hand, which is the price, a market achieves its market efficiency. So uh, when the market is left by its own, the price will basically will regulate the market in determining how much the price of iPhone should be and how much iPhone will be demanded or how much iPhone will be sold to the consumers. So that brings us to our another conclusion point, and that is economists often advocate free market as the best way to organize economic activity. So that's why from the economic point of view, most of the economists, they prefer a free market, that there is no regulation on the price of iPhone or the price of anything. So you let the market decide how much should be the price and let the producer decide how much they want to sell. So government is not controlling buyers of iPhone and they are not also controlling the sellers of the iPhone. So that is one way of allowing an economic activity to happen, or it's one way of managing the economy or having a free market basically, and that's the best way to organize economic activity. So I give the example of iPhone, but it applies to thousands of different products that everybody's bought and sold in the markets, and it includes computers, laptops, whatever you could buy, foods and whatsoever. So all of them are being decided by the price. So basically, price regulates these things, not the government, and that basically increases the welfare of the economy as a whole. Okay, so that brings us to there are two case studies also in the book. The invisible hand can park your car, and also should there be a market for organs. I will encourage you to go through these two case studies and you see how these two concepts are used. In the conclusion of this chapter, the author says like, yeah, free market is a nice idea to have, but we should also be careful about the assumptions of the market. First is that we assume that there is a competitive market. That means like there is no market power, like one company does not have power on deciding the price of a product. Probably the example of iPhone will not fit into the definition of competitive market. Why? Because iPhone is like a very unique product and there is no close substitute to that. So in case of iPhone, it may not be um, a good example, but whenever there is a competitive market or there or not a single firm has a full market power, then free market is good basically. But if there is no competition in the market, if there is only one or two firms, then this um, free market might not be an efficient way of running the economy. So that was one assumption. And the second assumption is that we should also consider that during the production and consumption of iPhone, for example, there might be externalities that will also affect the society as a whole, but none of the buyers or sellers are accounting for that. For example, in the production of iPhone, there could be the production firms or the factories will result in air pollution, or they will discriminate, I don't know, chemicals in the air, and that's basically not good. So if you leave the production of such products without government intervention, that basically will cost more to the economy or to the society as a whole. Why? Because they are polluting the air or the water or whatsoever, but they are not being responsible for that. So if there is a pollution in a market or if there is like side effects, in that case, free market is not a good idea. So there should be government intervening and controlling such externalities. So both these two concepts of market power, that some firms they have market power, and also the concept of externalities, like especially the negative externalities such as pollution, they are called market failure. So if these two concepts exist in a market, it's called market failure. And then it depends upon the public policy makers who will try to find a solution to these policies or ways of intervening to the market to reduce the negative externalities and also to reduce the market power of single company to influence the price of that product. And that way the government will intervene in the market to reduce these negative externalities, but also allowing the free market to function normally or as would function otherwise. Okay, so that concludes this chapter. As I said at the beginning, we will use this concept, we will take this concept further in the coming two chapters, and we will see how this concept of consumer surplus and producer surplus help us analyze, number one, the welfare effect of taxation. That's the topic of the chapter 8 or the next session. And second, we will see how we can use these concepts in analyzing the effect of international trade. So with the help of these economic tools, we will see how taxation is, for example, increases or decreases the welfare of the society. And we will also see how international trade basically benefits or does not benefit the member of the society. So that are the topics of the coming two lectures, and we will use these consumer surplus and producer surplus as a concepts that is already clear to you, and we will build on this topic going forward. Okay, that was all for this lecture, and I wish you all the best and see you in the next lecture.